This is Leader with Navia today, here from Brazil, 6 p.m. This is the third season, and today I have a very, very special guest with me, Jennifer Williamson. She is a former senior vice president of Sodexo on marketing, branding, and communications. She will talk about this in a while. And this is the program number 144.
Wow.
So we've been here since June 2020, every week, twice a week, every Tuesday and Friday, now at 6 p.m. Brazil time, every week with gender equality. This week, I will have an exception. I will have two women, but it's rare to have exceptions here. And for these next 4 weeks, we're gonna have only global leaders talking to me and to you, and all in English. So, Jennifer, besides the career she has developed, she will talk a lot about it with me. She's a mother of three, and 20, 18, and 15. She also has two dogs and two loving parents at home. So, she's quite busy. Although her daughter, the eldest, is at the university, not at home anymore, but she's still very, very busy. And she's a founder of her own business right now, and she will talk about everything here with us. So, Jennifer, it's a pleasure to have you here with me, and please tell us your story.
Oh, thank you so much, Navia. So, if I were to write the title to my story, I would say it's an accidental executive, right? Because I had never planned on having a big career. I always wanted to be just a stay-at-home mom. If I were to introduce you to the characters you would meet in that story, you would meet a mother, a wife, a daughter, a sister, a leader, a friend, an ally, a sponsor, a mentor. Right? I play kind of all of those roles and have played them throughout my career. If I were to give you the preface to the story, it would be exactly what I shared with you. I had always wanted to be a stay-at-home mom. My parents sent me to a Catholic college prep school. They wanted me to get a good education, and everybody from there went to college. So I was like, all right, I guess I have to go to college. And, I thought about what kind of career is going to help me, achieve my goal of being a stay-at-home mom eventually. So I was like, all right, I'll study teaching. So that's what I studied. And when I graduated from college, I taught school for a year, high school history. I loved teaching, but I did not like where I was living. I was living in New Hampshire. So I moved back home and I started working on my master's degree in education, because in Connecticut, you needed a master's degree. I started working. I picked up a job to pay for that. And I was working at General Electric World Corporate Headquarters, managing, kind of the dining programs there. The company I was working for, it was Gardner Merchant at the time, and then merged all the way to Sodexo. They sent me to a training program, and, the trainer asked us, where do we see ourselves in 5 years?
Yeah.
And, I looked at him and I said, in your job, because for me, it combined the love of teaching with my love of the food service industry, right? I had all through high school worked in a retirement home, serving, the people that lived there. I worked from a waitress all the way up to head cook, right? So I just loved the industry and never put two and two together. So I immediately switched my major from a master's in education to an MBA with a concentration in human resources, because I figured that would give me that opportunity. I worked on my MBA throughout the time I was working there at General Electric, and I had the good fortune of being in the dining rooms with, Jack Welch, Larry Bossidy, Dennis Dammerman, hearing in practice, everything that I was learning in the evenings, right? So for me, it was the best education I could have ever gotten. I
Sure.
could never repeat a word that I heard, that will go to my grave with me. But it just crystallized the theory that I was learning in the evening. So, that's kind of the first chapter of my story, was actually in an operation, running a piece of business, learning all the things about managing a team of people, meeting deadlines, working under pressure, managing budgets, everything I never thought I would be doing, but actually kind of liked it. When I graduated with my MBA, it took me 6 years to complete it because I was, doing it part-time, paying for it. I wasn't about to take out loans or anything. I started the second chapter of my career, which was actually going into human resources. So I spent time as a human resources generalist and did everything from employee relations, labor relations, training, recruitment, employee engagement. You name it, I did it. And I was a field HR support specialist in 2 of the segments within Sodexo, so the corporate services segment and then our K through 12 school services segment. I moved into an enterprise role, working for the CHRO, doing things like strategic projects, communications for the HR team. Also at that time is when we brought on our chief diversity officer at Sodexo and started our diversity journey. So I picked up the phone and called her on her first day and said, "Hey, how can I help you?" And I was with her throughout the whole ride of, developing our diversity strategy, looking at the metrics, doing the analytics, implementing programs like mentoring, employee resource groups, the training that we did, all of that. And during that time, I was doing a lot of communicating, right? Communicating internally within the organization to bring them along on this change journey, but also communicating externally. So I wrote our first ever diversity and inclusion annual report, did a lot of communications with our NGO partners, our suppliers, our diverse suppliers, our clients that we served about our diversity and inclusion journey and what our goals were. And that kind of led to the third chapter of my career when the CEO, tapped me and asked me to head up all of communications for North America. And I said, absolutely. And I went into the bathroom and I cried. I cried because I was like, I am not ready to take on this job.
Imposter syndrome.
There you go. And I had started preparing myself to move my career in that direction. I had started doing some learning on, public relations and marketing, to get myself ready to eventually aspire to that role in 18 months, right? Not right then and there. I called my husband, I was in tears, and he's like, they wouldn't have offered it to you if they didn't think you could do it. So, that started the third chapter of my career, which was heading up communications for North America, but also as a member of the global communications team, working on a lot of global problems, global projects, as well as solving, resource issues, directing how our communications programs would go. Did a lot of public relations, crisis communications, crisis management, dove into marketing, got to play in some fields, things like implementing marketing automation systems and, always exploring and seeing where I could go. The last third of that chapter, I moved from heading up communications for North America into a global role, heading up communications for our K through 12 and university segment. So going deep into one segment, but globally. And, I stepped into that role in May of 2019. And in March of 2019, when coronavirus came along and basically shut down the world and sent everybody home, my position was eliminated. I would have done the same exact thing as a leader, because we needed to conserve cash and all of that. And it was probably the best thing that happened to me, because it gave me time to start my fourth chapter, which is really about, reflecting on where I want to go next, right? My whole career was with Sodexo, which is very atypical for a Gen Xer. But it didn't feel like 3 decades, because every 18 to 24 months, the scope of my responsibilities changed, right? So it may not have always been moving up, but I was expanding what I was working on. So it didn't feel like that, right? So now I'm in my fourth chapter and, doing several different things. First and foremost, I've started, as Navia said, a small consulting business, helping other organizations with communications and diversity and inclusion. And I've also taken on a unique role as a home health aide, taking care of my parents, and they're both old. They're not in the best of health and, require a lot of care. And I'm actually thankful that I'm home to be here with them, because I was always on the road. I was always traveling. So that's my story.
Wow. What an inspiring story. I loved it. So are you the only daughter they have?
No, there's 3 of us. So I have an older sister and a younger brother. So between the 3 of us, my sister is the nurse. So she handles like all of the conversations with the doctors, everything else, because she knows that stuff. I am more, the health aide. I get them where they need to go. I, make sure they're fed. I, take care of them when they're here. And then my brother, he's younger. His kids are younger. He pops in and helps when he can. But there's 3 of us.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
My mom, she has 10 brothers and sisters.
Wow.
And my grandmother is still alive. She's 99 years old.
God bless her.
They kind of share responsibilities, but mostly among the two of she and another sister, and all the other boys. They go to see the mom, to talk to her, but the good job is with the still with the ladies.
Yeah.
So you haven't shared one chapter of your career, your wife and mom career. When did you start it?
So that started way later than I had originally thought, right? So, I didn't get married until I was 30. Didn't have my first child until I was 34, which that's becoming more, more common now. Back then I was like, what's wrong with me? When I was 25, I'm like, I'm not married. What's wrong with me? It was kind of crazy, but there's more options now, right? For women, you don't have to get married, right? And that's what I keep telling my daughters. I'm like, explore, live your life, discover the world. Don't get yourself tied down. But yeah, so my husband and I, it'll be 25 years this year that we've been married. My kids are fantastic. I've got one that's in university, and she's doing fantastic. I have another daughter. She's 18 years old. She just graduated from high school, and she's staying home this year, working, figuring out what she wants to do. And I'm fine with that, right? Like, you don't need to go to college. There's alternate paths to get to where you ultimately want to go. And I have a 15-year-old son who's still in high school. So it's kind of cool that I'm home with them now, because I wasn't really home with them when they were little, right? I was always traveling, but now we can do things like I can pick up my son from school and take him to school in the morning. And look, my daughter and I today, she wanted to buy a exercise bike. So we went to Costco. She bought herself an exercise bike, and just before this call, we were putting it together, right? So I'm getting to do those fun things that I didn't get to do a lot when they were little.
Yeah, I love it. We have very similar stories because I got married. I never thought I would get married or be a mother. It wasn't part of the plan. And I got married when a month before I was 32.
Okay.
And I was a mother at 34, and then after at 36. So it's a similar story. And I say to my girls, nobody, men or women, should ever think about getting married before they are 30 years old, because you have so much to do before it. So.
Right. Yeah.
And Jennifer, tell me, what being a mother added value to your leadership style, to your role as a leader?
Yeah, so, I think I have been managing the team remotely since 2001.
Wow.
Well before the pandemic, everything else. When after I had my first daughter and I went back to work, I called home to check on her and, heard her screaming in the background. And I was just like, this is crazy. So because, my boss was in Gaithersburg, my team was kind of across the United States. I was going into a small regional office where nobody I worked with was there. So I called my boss at the time and I said, hey, would you mind if I worked from home? Right. I still had, I still had childcare. It wasn't like I was there playing with the baby the whole time. I had childcare to watch the baby. But that compassion of letting me work from home made me work 110% because I was so appreciative of that, right? I was so appreciative of that. So how it kind of impacted me as a leader is taking that into account, right? People work to live. They don't live to work. And so always getting to know the people on my team and what they liked outside of work, what they did, having that empathy, particularly for, young women in their career, just starting out, starting a family, everything else. For me, it was always about what your output is, not what your face time is, right? And my team was, again, spread out across the United States. As my roles progressed, I had people globally around the world. But for me, it was about, again, just developing that team and creating a sense of collaboration, a sense of camaraderie when we weren't all in the same office, right? And then also having that empathy and knowing when people are working from home, my team, they were so appreciative of the fact that they were able to, be at home and whatnot. I knew they were giving 110%, right? They were giving more because they had that flexibility.
Yeah, perfect. We're going to go back to this point, but I wanted to know, how do you define your leadership style?
Yeah, so my my leadership style, I would say, is that of a servant leader. I believe I'm here to help people achieve what they want to achieve, right? There were people who saw in me what I did not see in myself and helped me grow along the way. And I feel that's my leadership style, right? Is to be that leader that identifies the talent that people may not see in themselves and help them grow and develop with that. When I looked back preparing for this interview. I looked back on some of my 360 reviews and stuff at what people said about me. And, they said I'm authentic, which I am. Again, I believe people live to work. They don't work to live. Or people work to live. They don't live to work. And I tried to create a sense of camaraderie. So we would celebrate, if somebody had a big achievement either in work or outside of work, we would do virtual baby showers, virtual wedding showers, as the team grew and progressed. The other thing, the team, I brought that piece of myself with them. Every Christmas I would make homemade cookies and fudge and give them to my team. Right. And it was great when there were 6 people, 8 people, 10 people, when I finally left, I had 71 people that I was responsible for. And as it was, I was like, well, maybe I'll phase this out. Maybe I'll phase this out. But, what happened was the team kept saying, oh, you get these cookies and fudge. And I'm like, oh, I can't stop, So, I would make these things and pack them up in the car and, drive them down to Gaithersburg. And, for the team that was there, they would get them and ship them out wherever they were. So, that's a little bit about my leadership style.
Oh, great. I love this story. And I love the way you define it. You say, I'm here to identify qualities or abilities they don't see in themselves, and help them develop them. That's so caring and so servant. I love it. How do you define your purpose right now, Jennifer? Because we know purpose changes or evolves from time to time, depending on our life moment. So what is your purpose right now?
Yeah, and I thought about that question in advance, and I think consistently throughout my life, my purpose has kind of been to care for others, right? And it started, when I was in high school working in the retirement home. I had 90 grandparents that I was serving, right? They were my grandparents. And then when I went to school to be a teacher, that's caring for others. And then moving into human resources is about caring for people, right? Mm-hmm. So, and even now, as I look at what I'm doing both in the home and then with my consulting business, it's about, caring for other people, helping people with their diversity work, helping them with their communications. It's helping them to create a more inclusive environment. It's helping them to be authentic in their communications with their teams. It's about care. So that's how I would define my purpose.
Perfect. And what is the role that communication plays in all this caring work? Because I always like to talk about this because I still see so many senior leaders not paying attention to the way they communicate, not seeing communication as a fundamental leadership ability. That I always like to talk about it. So what is the role that communication has played to your career, to your leadership style, to your purpose?
Yeah. So, there's communication with the big C, right? So that's the formal communication. That's the formal messages that go to the investors or to the press, or, like even internally within an organization, there's that. But for me, the real communication and the communication where you get employee engagement and you build employee satisfaction, you build employee commitment, is with the authentic communication, right? And that's, I think leaders, they may tend to want to put on this air of, oh, I've got this, I'm the leader, I can't share too much. And that puts off teams, that puts off people. But when you can sit and have a conversation with somebody about what's important to them, sharing what's important to you, sharing what you're going through as a person or an individual, and creating a space where people can talk about what's going on in their lives. That's the important communication. And that's the communication that I would try to help our leaders achieve as we were working through, whatever it is we were working through. The other piece of that is listening, right?
Yeah.
Communication is not just talking, but it's listening. So, creating opportunities for senior leaders to meet with the people in the field, the teams out there every day doing the hard work, and to hear what's happening, what it means, what's going on in their world, how we could make their lives easier, was critically important to me. So again, it's that authentic piece. It's being open and honest with your team about what's going on, in your world, in your life, as well as listening, are the
Yeah.
important pieces for me.
Yeah, for sure. I totally agree with you. And how about trust, Jennifer? Because when you were talking about how you have been working remotely from home since 2001, so it's
Yep.
been 20 years, all your
Yep.
journey
Yep.
at Sodexo. Um, I think about trust because we still facing a lot of issues uh, in corporations because they don't trust each other.
Yep. Yep. Yeah. So, and again, I'll share what has worked for me as a leader, right? And a really good example I can share with you of this is, when the CEO kind of tapped me to take on, the head of communications role, I was, going to be responsible for a team of communications professionals, right? These were folks that, were PR professionals, marketing professionals. I was the HR person, right? I had zero credibility as, as a communications person, right? I had done some stuff, but nowhere near what they were. And, for me, developing trust with that team was about, first and foremost, meeting with each person individually,
Mhm.
right? Understanding who they were as a person, right? What was going on in their lives outside of work, right? What were they passionate about? What did they want to achieve personally? And then understanding, okay, professionally, what have you been working on, right? What are your goals? What are your objectives? All of that. And then what are their aspirations, right? Where do they want to go? So that, kind of listening tour from everybody, that helped. But then the second piece of that was kind of synthesizing everything that I heard from the team about what they were working on with what I was hearing from the organization, right? So also meeting with the other leaders in the organization to understand, okay, what's working, what's not working, what should we start doing, what should we stop doing, what should we do more of, and then bringing that feedback to the team and together co-creating, okay, there's the strategy. Okay, where do we go next, right? So I think creating trust is about building that plan together with your team, as well as getting to know people as a person. That's the heart of it in terms of developing trust.
For sure, for sure. I love the way you explain it because I agree with every word, and
Yeah.
it's so crystal clear. So I hope everyone listens to you as well. So, what about vulnerability? We've been talking a lot about it. How have you dealt with this over your career? Was it easy? Was it difficult? Was it allowed or not? Because we are the same generation
Yeah.
and we know that this wasn't always allowed in our
Yeah.
corporate lives.
Yeah. Yeah. So for me, vulnerability is also like very closely tied to kind of imposter syndrome in some respects for me, right? Not for Norm, but for me it is. And, for me, again, I was, always going into roles and positions where I may not have had the full knowledge, right? So when I started working with our chief diversity officer on our diversity journey, I didn't have a background in diversity. I'm like, all right, how am I going to do this? When I moved into communications, I didn't have a background in communications. But I think being vulnerable as a leader is recognizing you don't have all the answers. You don't need to have all the answers. The people on your team have the answers. So trusting your team and letting your team know that, right? Letting your team know you need their advice, their input, their ideas to help you and to help the organization as a whole make better decisions, right? So that has kind of always been my approach to things, right? And I think it works well. I think if you're not vulnerable, you can't build trust and you can't have those true empathetic discussions. So I mean, vulnerability is key.
For sure, for sure.
Yeah.
And Jennifer, how do you deal with mistakes?
Oh my gosh. So first and foremost, if you're not making mistakes, you're not growing, right?
Yeah,
You're not learning, you're not getting, new skills, new knowledge, new ability, right? So I think the importance of making mistakes is it's critical, right? You need to make mistakes to learn, but it's also important to reflect on those mistakes and understand, okay, what should I have done? Could I have done differently? What did I learn from this? And how am I going to bring that forward? Right. So I think it's absolutely critical that you make mistakes. Right. And I'll share, an example of this, very early on. One of the first, diversity and inclusion annual reports that we published, we sent it out to all of our clients, right? It was fantastic. We're like, okay, we're going to get this to all of our clients. And we talked about, in addition to mentoring, everything else in there, our employee business resource groups. We had a pride organization, a pride network group, and we had a little blurb about each of our network groups in there. And, I was like, all right, this is great. This is wonderful. Well, one of our Christian universities that we serve, one of the priests there took exception to the fact that we had a pride group.
wow.
And that was, that was a big mistake on my part. Not that we published that annual report that had that, but that I did not prepare the manager that was responsible for that client in how to handle that discussion, right?
Sure.
So there was a lot of learning that came out of that for me. One was, okay, we need to think through all of the audiences. So when I publish new things, it's like, all right, let's get some beta readers in here, let's get some beta reaction to what we're publishing. Let's also make sure that we are equipping, the managers and the leaders within the organization, our sales team, with why this is important, right? Why we're publishing this, why we're putting it out there. And then lastly, how to help reconcile, what may be one belief about the LGBTQ community and how it may or may not fit within somebody else's beliefs, and how to build the conversation on shared values
Sure.
versus discrete different, opinions about things. So there was a lot of learning that came out of that mistake. It made me a better communicator as I moved forward with things. and it just helped all around. So mistakes are good. Like, you need to make mistakes in order to learn and grow.
Sure, sure. And the better you learn,
Yeah.
How do we build, you have talked about this earlier, how do we build more inclusive environments, Jennifer? Because I think this is the biggest challenge we have
Yeah.
nowadays.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think coming, well, I don't know if we're coming out of the pandemic or not, right? Like, every time we think we're coming out, something else happens.
We're not.
So we're not, but I think in this environment, right, we have this perfect opportunity to rise to the occasion that's been presented to us, right? So for much of the pandemic, when people have been working from home, like, we have been in each other's living rooms, in each other's bedrooms, in each other's kitchens and dining rooms. We have met each other's, kid running in the background, or dog barking, or cat walking across the keyboard. It forced us into this environment of just being empathetic, right? Because we were all in the same boat, right? For the most part, right? Knowledge workers were kind of all in the same boat. So I think building on that empathy is going to be critical to creating this inclusive environment. I think for leaders, becoming aware of your own unconscious bias, right? We all have it. It's there. It's not good or bad. It's just there. So how can we as leaders become aware of that, and, be very conscious about it, and be conscious about our language, be conscious of how we include people, be conscious of who may not be sitting at the table that can help inform decisions, right? Who are we sponsoring? Who are we an ally to? And how are we bringing people along? I think that's like absolutely critical now. And we have a great moment coming out of this to do that. I just read, there was a survey, Future Focus, recently published. They started this when the whole pandemic started. It's a global survey that they do of over 10,000, knowledge workers, in 7 different countries. And what is coming out of that survey is people are actually feeling a stronger sense of belonging with, kind of this flexible hybrid work environment, right? Where there's some time in the office, some time at home. The key is going to be to make sure we're not falling into proximity bias, where, when people are in the office, we see the people in the office, they're the people that get the opportunities, right? Leaders need to be very conscious of the team that's out there, the team that's dispersed, the team that's not in the office. And how do you reach out to them? How do you make sure they're included and they're being developed, right? So it's a time for a great reset in terms of how leaders think about how they manage others, how they lead others. And it can be done, right? It can be done.
Yeah. The pandemic showed us that it can be done. Yeah. Jennifer, from your perspective, from your point of view, what are the underrepresented groups that have more challenges nowadays to be properly represented and included in the work environment, in the workspace?
I think there's a lot, right? So if you look at the whole disabled community, right, whether they're neurodivergent or, have different abilities, whatever, the pandemic kind of opened up more opportunity, right, when everybody was working from home. But as we, kind of rush to get people back in the office, we can't lose sight of that, right? We can't lose sight of that group, and making sure that we have representation from that group at all levels within the organization, right? I think that's one community. I think the LGBTQ community is another community that we have a lot of work to do in terms of representation, again, at all levels within the organization. And it's only through getting that representation that you can make better decisions, right?
Sure.
So, one of the things, and I was reading an article on this not too long ago. The rapid tests, right? The home tests now that you can take to see if you've got COVID or not. It's very hard for people who are visually impaired to use those tests, right?
Yeah.
So, what I'm thinking is, okay, well, maybe if somebody who was, visually impaired or attuned to some of the challenges within, the disabled community were at the table as those tests were being developed, right?
Yeah.
How would that have changed the outcome? So again, I mean, I think there's still a lot of, overt bias that's out there, as well as unconscious bias for all underrepresented communities. But for me, I think it's those two groups that we don't want to lose sight of that. We need to, keep that moving forward.
I am a big fan of the way the American society participates in the community lives. It's completely different from the way we work here and we participate here. And so my question to you is do you still have time to work in your community, to be a citizen? What kind of work do you have time to do on your community?
Yeah, so I would say I don't think I do enough, right? I think
We never think we do enough.
Yeah. I definitely think there's more that I can do, but some of what I, is in particular more recently, just given everything that's going on in the United States, right? It's a crazy time that's happening right now, but I try to make sure that I know what do our representatives, right, the people we vote for, where do they stand on issues? Where do they stand on things like LGBTQ rights, rights for the disabled, supporting them, Black Lives Matter? Like, where do my representatives stand on that? And am I aligned to that or not? And if I'm not, how am I going to vote differently the next time around, right? So that's one way that I stay involved in my community. I think the other thing is staying involved in supporting communities or causes that I believe in. So, I contribute to the Human Rights Campaign here. I contribute to the Trevor Project. The Trevor Project is, about preventing suicide amongst the LGBTQ community youth, right? So those are causes that I try to, make sure that I'm contributing financially to. And then lastly, where I can physically get involved, we had, back in 2020, after the horrible murder of George Floyd and all the events that took place, within our community here, we had a memorial, a remembrance, a rally for Black Lives Matter. And for me, that was it was so powerful because it was organized with, our town leaders, but the youth within the community, right? So students from the high school, students who recently graduated from the high school, they were the ones that put that together. And then the power of all of the people that were there supporting this, right? And I don't live in a very, racially or ethnically diverse community, right? It's not that diverse here. But to see that everybody showed up, or the number of people that showed up to support that, I think that's important too,
Yeah,
right?
sure,
So.
sure. What was your biggest learning from this whole pandemic so far, Jennifer?
Oh my gosh. Well, there's a couple of things. So one, like the fact that I've been managing a remote team for so long. It's like I was ahead of my time, right?
Yeah, for sure. And you were unconscious about it.
Yeah. So that was part of it. I think the other thing that was a huge learning for me was mental well-being, mental health. And that's something that I always took for granted, right? And as I worked through my career with, imposter syndrome, high functioning anxiety, all of that, I always pushed it aside, right? Like when my heart would start racing or my chest would feel constricted, I would say to myself, well, that you're not exercising enough, or you're not running enough miles in the week, and that's what's causing all of this, right? And trying to do it all and not realizing that I had anxiety, right? And it took getting shingles and a doctor saying to me, you've got to do something about this. Like, you can't keep at this pace. You can't keep denying that this exists.
Yeah.
That was a huge learning for me, right? We were dealing with anxiety with my children as well. Like, the pandemic took a toll on everybody.
Yeah.
And so, realizing that it's okay to not be okay. Like, that you don't have to power through, you don't have to push through. It's okay to give yourself some self-care. It's okay to talk to somebody, to help you through that. That was, for me personally, kind of the biggest learning coming out of the pandemic. I think the other thing coming out of it, or, we're still in this, but, as we come out of this, I think this is truly an opportunity for us, as leaders and educators and everything, to rethink and reset how we do everything, right?
Yeah.
And, it was, I can't imagine, like, if my kids were younger and I had to homeschool them, and work and all of that. I cannot imagine how difficult that would have been. But I also know that for a lot of kids, it was actually a blessing in disguise that they were learning from home, they were online, bullying decreased, social anxiety for kids decreased. So there's a balance, right?
Yeah.
It's not to say one thing's better than the other, but I think it's our time to figure that out. And same thing with, leadership in corporate America. It's not about everybody being in the office every day or everybody being home every day. We have to figure out how to help people work to live, right? Not live to work. So
Sure.
I think those are my biggest lessons there.
Sure. And last Friday, Peter said something that I loved. He said, when we were talking about mental health, he said, mental health is somewhere in between inclusiveness
Yep.
and belonging.
Yep.
And that for me resumes everything that you said. So when you think about the kids that were happy because they were outside of school, and then bullying decreased, or harassment or any kind of violence, they were not included.
Right.
They were not belonging to that space. And if we come to the corporate space, corporate work, it's quite the same. So
yeah.
Great learning.
Yeah.
And how do you take care of your mental and physical health right now, Jennifer?
Yeah. So, and this is kind of been, all along, I've always focused on my physical health, right? Because like if something happens to me, I can't care for others, right? So I have to keep
Sure.
myself healthy. So, that manifests itself in, when I was younger, running and, going to the gym and, giving myself the grace to do that because it was important, eating healthy, all of that. Now it's more about my mental health. So it is about things like taking time to be grateful for what I have, taking time to meditate, right? To just be still, just be quiet, just think, looking at and appreciating the beauty around me, right? This past, almost year, I have been able to see the most beautiful sunsets from my home office,
Yeah.
looking, out that way, the most beautiful sunrises. And, for the 7 years we've been living in this house, I don't think I ever saw one, right? I never took the time. So I think that's important. Giving myself the grace to read a book for pleasure, right? And not always be reading the Harvard Business
Yeah.
Review, the latest, corporate novel that everybody needs to read, right? So I think that's been important to me. And then just, like getting out and enjoying the time with my kids, the time with my family, not always being on the run, on the go, go, go it's just been wonderful.
Oh, great. And
Yeah,
well, I'm very curious about something. You have been working with food service and dining. Do you like cooking?
I do. Yes. Yeah. One of the things the way I would channel all my mommy guilt, right, when my kids were little is I would make these crazy cakes for their birthdays, right? I would, and these, they weren't like the simple, like I did a 3D replica of my daughter's dog, her stuffed dog,
Wow.
I made a pirate ship for my son. I did a tiger, so like I would channel all of my mommy guilt into,
Okay.
making these cakes and stuff. And baking cookies, all that. One of the things that I've been doing right now is, my parents are Polish and German, and there's Eastern European blood in there. So going back and finding, recipes that my dad ate as he was growing up. So experiment with making things like pagaci and, poppy seed roll and nut roll and babka and, like
Oh,
all that
great.
kind of stuff. So that's been a lot of fun.
Yeah. And Jennifer, what are the abilities that you think leaders must have from now on?
Yeah. So definitely empathy. I mean, that's not going to go away, and with this whole, great resignation reset, I think leaders who can be empathetic with their teams are going to be the leaders that are going to succeed. I think cultural competence is another skill that leaders need to develop and constantly be developing, because you're going to have teams from, individuals from all over, right? So
Yeah.
how do you create a welcoming, inclusive environment without having that cultural competence? And that doesn't mean knowing everything about every culture, but it means owning that you don't know it and being curious
Curious. Yeah.
to learn. So I think, curiosity is kind of another key skill that leaders are going to need going forward.
And what does it make you stay awake at night?
Oh my gosh. So there were so many things as I was working full time that would keep me up, at night. But right now I think there's kind of two things that play out. There's the macro level and the micro level, So at the macro level, I really, what keeps me up is just like the discourse here in the United States within our our whole political government system, and, the fact that you've got grown-ups, bullying and just, beating up on, transgender children, like at a macro level, that just, it's like, how did we get here, right? How did this happen? So that, once or twice a week, I that like just gets me going and I can't sleep. On a micro level, it's my kids, and
For sure.
their safety, their mental well-being, their mental health, their physical health, are what are they going to be in the world? Like that keeps me up sometimes too. Not all the time, but like I'll start when I start having my own anxiety attacks. I'm like, okay, what did I pass on to my kids here with this, right? So,
And now, what is your biggest dream, Jennifer?
oh gosh, so I had to think about this, right? So, I think my biggest dream has always been, I would love to open up a bed and breakfast on a beach somewhere,
Wow.
right? And have it be this place where I could host, like small weddings or showers or small events, family reunions, but just, a kind of a boutique bed and breakfast somewhere on the beach. I have been rethinking that a little bit, though, because with climate change and everything that's going to happen, our coastal towns are going to, kind of erode and fade away. So I've been rethinking it. It's going to be a bed and breakfast, probably on a lake somewhere inland. So that's kind of my biggest dream there.
Well, I love the idea. I'll be your guest.
Yeah. I welcome you.
So, what prevents you from making it a reality?
Oh, one day I will, right? The
Okay.
risk, I've done research on it, and very few bed and breakfasts succeed, right? It's not a very lucrative career to get into. So when I move into that space, I need to know I'm going to be financially stable, and not
Okay.
have to rely on that as income. In many cases, it can be sunk cost, right?
Yeah.
So that's what prevents it right now. Once I get
Okay.
all my kids through college, then I'll
Okay.
have some
After
money to
that,
play with.
yeah.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
If you didn't have any fear, any at all, what would you do that you have not done yet?
Yeah. So okay, this was when I had to think about too. I would want to like climb a major mountain somewhere,
Wow.
right? I would love to have that experience and to do that. Will I ever overcome the fear? I don't think so. But that would be something I'd want to do.
Okay, fair enough. This is one of the biggest wishes that they are mostly, when I ask this question, they are most related to things that we cannot control completely, or highs or deep. So
Yep.
diving or jumping or
Yep.
from the sky or
Yep.
climbing a mountain. So it goes over these kind of fears that we
Yep.
have, that we know we are not with total control.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
So before I ask you my last question, so when the conversation is so good, so inspiring, time runs, and
Yeah.
we are almost 1 hour
Oh
here
my gosh. Yeah.
talking. Yeah. Before I ask you the last question, I just want to thank everyone that was here listening to us, and Sabia Pinheiro that said we had an amazing and very inspiring conversation. Eduardo also said hello here. So, and I want to invite you to be with me next Friday at 6 p.m. Brazil time. I'm going to have a great other guest, and this week, as I said, two women, an exception, but it's fair. It's very fair to have them both here. Jennifer, my last question is always about this. What is the legacy that you want to leave? How do you want to be remembered when you're not here anymore?
Yeah. I think I want to be remembered as a good mother, and I want to be remembered as somebody who cared, right? Who made a difference in the lives of the people that I've come in touch with. That's it. I don't need a big legacy, right? Like that's important to me.
But that's huge. Yeah, I do believe that. So, any final message you want to leave with our audience?
No, I just want to say thank you so much for inviting me to participate on this. And, thank you to everybody that joined today. This is our moment, right? This is our moment to think about how we do things differently. Let's grab it. Let's capitalize on it.
Thank you, Jennifer, for such an inspiring conversation. I learned a lot. I love the way you talk about everything. So, fortunately, this pandemic will be over somehow, and I'll visit you.
Yes. That would be fantastic.
I will love to. I love the sunsets, so I will love to be with you watching the sunset from your view.
Yes, great. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye,
Have
everybody.
a great week.
Yep. Bye-bye.